We'll just call this meeting back to order, and Mike will join us when he can. Thank you all for being here today. We are now on, could I have someone move approval of the agenda? Moved by Director Crompton, seconded by Director Birch-Jones. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. And we're also looking for Ms. Halitsky to join us for, great. She's going to present on 4.1. Good morning, Ms. Halitsky. Welcome. Thank you for being here today. I understand that you have a presentation regarding the numerous changes to M192. And if you could walk us through that, that would be helpful.
Good morning to the board, and thank you, Chair. I don't really have a presentation, but a quick summary of some of the changes that we're proposing for the SLRD reopening plan. So the new recommendations in the M192 report, there is the policy to approve the SLRD's COVID-19 reopening plan, and it's been amended, and we're basically looking for approval for these amendments to the reopening plan. So version 3 of the plan includes amendments to stages, or SLRD's reopening stages 2B and 3, with stage 2B anticipated to commence as of September 29th, with public access to the office enabled, and a new communicable disease prevention plan in place by then. Start date for stage 3 is still to be determined, but will allow for in-person public attendance at board meetings pursuant to procedure bylaw amendments once they're adopted, and new virtual meeting technology up and running in the SLRD boardroom. So included with the M192 report are two versions, or sorry, drafts of the reopening plan. The first one with the changes highlighted in red, and the second one is the clean version of the draft reopening plan policy. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions from anyone? Seeing none, I have a question. So I was rather confused by this, as the restrictions in the province aren't reflected in this. So currently, and things are changing on a daily basis. We acknowledge that today we're back into a masks in public spaces, indoor facilities, as dictated yesterday. So that change was not obviously in this current package, and the vaccine passport will also need to be implemented into this policy, or is that into a different policy? That's my question, is how is that reflected, that vaccine policy, passport policy?
Yeah, so a lot of the changes that were announced, or the new announcements this week, were announced after this report was prepared. So those are things that we've discussed on a preliminary basis, but of course we haven't yet fully explored all of those considerations in detail. Right now, our Joint Health and Safety Committee is currently reviewing our communicable disease prevention plan, and that plan doesn't contemplate the changes that were announced this week. So we're going to have to go back to updating the plan just with all of those changes incorporated, as well as just formulating the plan in a way that doesn't require us to keep having to go back and forth and changing things when we want to be able to pivot as quickly as possible when changes are announced by the province. This reopening plan doesn't contemplate those changes, but we're sort of aiming for stage, and our stages do not align with the BC's restart plan. They're a little bit different in our plan, but we are aiming for the next stage of our reopening, stage 2B, to be on as of September 29th, when that M192 order expires. Sorry, it expires on September 28th.
Okay. Okay, any other questions? Director Crompton, go ahead.
What does this say about our timeline on in-person public meetings?
So we are aiming, and I may get Director Clark or CEO Helmer to jump in on this one, but we are aiming to enable that for September 29th. We do anticipate that the majority of board members will, still participate electronically, but at that point we will be looking to make efforts to allow in-person attendance.
And just so that I'm clear on that, the in-person means two things right now. They can come into the office and attend the board meeting in September, or they can watch the meeting, which will be either live streamed or recorded and available after. Is that correct?
Defer to Kristen on this one.
Director Clark.
Thank you. So as of September 28th, we lose our ability to not have the meeting open to the public, barring any changes that may happen over the next few weeks after the announcements in the last couple of days. But as of September 29th, we are required to have the public have the opportunity to attend a board meeting. So our plan is that we will be ready to allow people to come into our boardroom, but we will not have our virtual meeting technology set up. So we anticipate that we will continue to meet virtually, at least for the majority. Quorum will be obtained by the majority of directors attending electronically. And if there's some directors that want to come in, they will come in, but the meeting will be very much like it is now. We're still working through that, exactly what that will look like, but it will look like this. The only change we anticipate is that somebody could be sitting in the boardroom and we'd have to make the meeting available to them on a computer monitor.
Okay, so before COVID, our board meetings took place in the boardroom with staff attending as needed to make their presentations and answer questions, and then the staff would leave. Board members were able to attend around that board table or by phone. And then any member of the public was allowed to join in the room, but they were not permitted by our procedures bylaw to ask questions, make comments, or engage with the board on an official basis. I hear you that that policy hasn't changed yet, and that procedures bylaw needs to be amended to allow for quorum to be met by those attending virtually. Because as I recall, back in March of 2020, we all had to meet. We all had masks, I think, or maybe we weren't in masks yet, but we were all there and we were socially distanced in the board meeting because our procedures bylaw didn't allow for a meeting to occur without us in person. Am I right about that? I feel like that's how we all, because I remember driving up there feeling, oh, things are strange now. Is that right?
Correct. Whether those, it was right around that time that the new authorities came in, but I do believe I think we met either right before or right after, but we planned that meeting before those authorities came in.
Right. Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Director Crompton?
Is there anything preventing us from going back to pre-COVID, like attendance by phone, attendance in person direction? And I guess I asked that because it seems like the virtual meeting setup has sort of a undetermined end date at this point, or do we have clarity on when that will be up and running and available to us?
Director Clark?
Thanks, Chair. We are able, there's essentially a waiver of the section of the Freedom of Information Act and Protection of Privacy Act. Typically, as of December 31st, we will no longer be able to use a facility like Zoom or YouTube. We have the new system that we're in the process of, it's now been installed, but getting trained on. So by December 31st, unless that date is extended, we can no longer use the facilities we're using right now to convene our meetings, but we will have in place those new facilities. It's just a bit of an awkward, that extends longer than the requirement to have people be able to come in and attend a board meeting. And to Directors Crompton, I hope I'm answering this, but we can, whatever the board wants the future to look like will be addressed in the procedure bylaw amendments. So it's my hope to bring either a draft bylaw in September, or it might be just a more general conversation about what the board is looking for the future to look.
I guess I'm asking if we wanted to go back to masks and in person with the availability of the phone for September, would we be able to do that?
I believe we would be able to do that. We also have the benefit of that pandemic clause that we passed back in March, I believe, March of 2020, that allows us to meet virtually during a declared pandemic.
Yeah, so we can not meet in person, but we could meet in person if we so chose.
I believe we could. I would have to look at that a little more closely. I've kind of been on a different track looking at it under the pandemic clause. And I'm just thinking really quickly here. It would be on the phone. And we would have to take into account any kind of social distancing, masking, whatever's in place at that time.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Any other questions? Director Birch-Jones.
I just optimistically was planning to be in September in Pemberton for our meetings. Is that the plan? With also some people coming in remotely, but some people in person in the boardroom with masks.
Yep, go ahead, Director Clark.
Thanks, Chair. So our thought was, because we're still working on our communicable disease prevention plan, and we hope to be able to bring that as a policy to the September meeting. Our thought was to leave the virtual meeting intact for September until we can get those policies in place, or get a little more direction from the board.
Currently, the indication from the province is that things can change, but currently we're on track to move into stage 4 of the province's reopening plan for September 7th. The intention is to return to an in-person meeting we could explore other venues. We've often held board meetings in member municipalities' boardrooms, which are, certainly an option. So in the absence of the changes to the procedures bylaw and other policies required to enable public participation outside of the boardroom, is one of those an option? Director Clark or CAO Helmer or whoever has an answer to that question. Like, councils are meeting again. Our council is meeting in person again. Yes, there is challenges with technology and where it's housed and where it's saved and those things, but councils are meeting again, and there's a desire of the board to meet in person again.
Perhaps I'll let CAO Helmer speak. I'm just going to take a look at the procedure bylaw for a moment, if I may. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, so I think what I'm hearing is that if there's a way that we can safely hold this meeting on September the 29th in the boardroom and permit members of the board that would like to attend in person to be able to do that, you would like us to make that effort. Would that be a correct interpretation of what I'm hearing?
That's my desire. I see nodding heads around the room. Director Birch-Jones, did you want to?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay. So if that's the case, then what we'll do as staff is go away and see what we can do to permit you to show up in person. And like you guys have recognized, it may not be perfect, it may be disjointed and whatever, but we will look at what we can do to accommodate the desire of the board. And if there's a way, even if it's with a phone with streaming it, if there's a way we could offer that to attempt to, and if not, then do what you say, is revert to the old and put notices on our website to advise the public accordingly. We will look to accommodate your desire.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so the issue on the floor is 4.1, which is a request for decision to amend the reopening policy. Do you still want that motion, Director Clark or Ms. Halitsky? Because that's more than just the board meetings. This is the attendance of public to attend the office for other business. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do I have someone to make that motion? Moved by Director Mack, seconded by Director Wiebe. Any further discussion from anyone on the board? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Halitsky.
Thank you.
Tremendous amount of work in there, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so we're now on the consent agenda. Can I have someone move the consent agenda? Moved by Director Birch-Jones, seconded by Director Mack. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Sorry, was there anything that anyone wanted pulled from the consent agenda for discussion? Seeing none, we'll move along to number 6. Is there any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, we'll move on to 7.1, and we have Director Needham joining us for a request for decision on the electoral area D Heritage Revitalization Agreement bylaw. Good morning, Director Needham. Welcome. Director Needham, can you hear us? Director Needham, can you hear us now?
Yes, sorry about that.
Okay.
Yeah, so I assume we are on the HRA, the Heritage Revitalization Agreement.
That's right.
Okay. So yeah, so this is an agreement that's being proposed that would basically designate the properties in a heritage revitalization agreement. Sorry. Staff are requesting that the agreement be given 3 readings, and pursuant to Section 215 of the Local Government Act, that you referred to the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure for approval prior to being brought back for adoption. Staff are also recommending that a tax exemption bylaw be brought forward to the September 29th board meeting. In that report, there will be a little bit more detail about the type of tax exemption that is being requested. But roughly right now, the property is bringing in about $55,000 in tax revenue. So it's pretty negligible, because if anyone's driven by the Britannia Beach property, they'll see that there's really not much happening there. The buildings are all up on footings right now. And with the construction of the project, it would bring in normally about $373,000 worth of tax revenues. And that would entail a jump of about $318,000. The tax exemption that's being requested, and as I said, that'll be under separate cover, would be about $76,000 a year. So there still would be significant tax being brought in comparison to what is there now. I believe Ms. LaFrance will be bringing forward that report in September. These 2 reports sort of go hand in hand, the Heritage Revitalization Agreement and the tax exemption. So essentially, what it would mean is that for putting in the extra work and the cost of saving the heritage buildings at Britannia Beach, the developer would be granted a bit of a tax exemption. This is something that's done very frequently in cities in British Columbia where there are a lot of heritage resources. It's often done in places like City of Victoria, for example, and City of Vancouver, where there are a lot of heritage buildings that require protection through the development permit process. So in addition, this HRA is something that we have asked for prior to authorizing finalization of building permits at Britannia Beach. So this is something that the board has been apprised of in the past throughout the rezoning and development permit processes that have gone on at Britannia. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Director Pattengill, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. And maybe this is a question more for the board, but as I read through the report, sort of the historical context for this, I saw, I think, natives and native peoples mentioned once each, but no mention of Squamish Nation. Some of the history of the mine talks about a $30 million cleanup fund, but I believe the public tax so far put towards cleanup is 107 million plus, and sort of nothing addressing the significant impacts on Squamish Nation in particular over time. And so in general, the idea of some sort of historical recognition so on makes sense, but I want to make sure that, you know, in the context of everything we're talking about today, that this is a complete or accurate history and so on. And so I have a bit of discomfort in that, and I know it's not our sort of the goal of this to validate the sort of background report. But I'm just wondering how we reconcile those things, because I guess it feels, I'm a bit concerned that if we just sort of move ahead as is, we're kind of discounting a significant and very important part of the heritage that, for me, I think might be necessary to justify these designations.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So I believe that Director Pettingill is referring to the Britannia Beach Statements of Significance that were prepared by Donald Luxton. He's a professional heritage planner. He does these sorts of things all the time. The purpose of Statements of Significance are really to generally speak to why the heritage structures have significance and their history. It's not meant to be a full-fledged historical documentation of what has occurred in the area. I think these heritage consultants do their best to try and research and capture, what has gone on and the history of the buildings, etc. But essentially, the point of Statements of Significance is to document the structures that are on a site so that when we do development permits and issue building permits, we know essentially what the style and sort of the features, the key features of the buildings are. So really, we don't edit or get into professional reports. The professional reports are what they are. They may not capture all aspects of history, but they do essentially capture the key architectural and historical significance of the structures on site, so that that what are called the character defining elements are detailed and recorded, so that in future, when we deal with permits, we know sort of what was there, what are the key features, what do we need to preserve in terms of the building permit application process. So I think that it's important to make that clear, that this is not meant to be an all-encompassing, history of the site and etc.
Okay, any other questions? Director Demare, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Ford. This is just for Area D, and in the Heritage Registry, we're also going to put in a number of buildings for Area A. Down the road, will Area A be able to do something similar to what's requested here?
Yes, through the Chair. If an application comes forward for development in Area A, if buildings are on a heritage register, similar arrangements can be made in terms of heritage revitalization agreements and tax exemptions.
Okay, thank you.
These are provided for within the Local Government Act.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so there are many that's that it's read a first time, that it's read a second time, that it's read a third time, and that we refer to the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure for approval, and then that staff be directed to bring back a tax exemption bylaw to the September meeting. Would anyone like to go ahead? Mike, did you have a question or did you want to make the motion?
Sorry, no, I was just slow on the hand. I appreciate Director Needham's response, and it makes sense, but I do wonder if Director Pettengill's comments, if there's room within the Heritage Agreement for acknowledgement of other history, or to make sure that it is an inclusive history that gets represented there somehow. I don't know if this is the place to do that or where that discussion takes place, but I think it's a very well-placed question, and I'd like to know where we can address it.
Great, thank you. Director Needham? Is there
Yeah, I
someone-
mean, if one reads the statements of significance, there's, it goes back to Captain George Vancouver, and it does talk about Native history at the site, and particularly focuses on the site as it was used for mining and as a mining town. And so the reason that there is focus on that is that we're trying to preserve the heritage mining and mining town structures. So as I said previously, the statements of significance are not meant to address really anything else other than the history as they pertain to the structures on the site, which were primarily used as part of the Britannia mines. So I'm just not sure that statements of significance relating to a heritage preservation really, I'm not sure it's the place to start getting into some of these other issues.
So that was my, as a follow-up, if I may, that was my question. What is the place? Where do we address it and make sure that there is a good representation of histories? Yes, it's the heritage buildings. It's the rebuilding a mining town that is on traditional territories. So where does that get represented within the development? Where does that get represented within the documents? If not here, then where? Thanks.
The heritage structures were not used by natives. So the heritage structures on the site right now were not utilized by the Squamish Nation. They were used by residents and workers who worked for Britannia mines. So I just think that the scope that's being discussed is probably well outside sort of the point of the heritage statements of significance. Really, like I said, they're meant to define the defining character elements of historic buildings and structures. And there is some history thrown in around that, but that's really sort of secondary to the whole point of defining the character defining elements, and ensuring that those character defining elements are captured in the final design. So this is not about truth and reconciliation or historic land use beyond really the mining aspects of this.
And I get all that, and I understand that. So my question is, where can we help inform the history that is being represented by this development? This development is a heritage development. It represents a certain portion of history, as you say, in the building, and I get all that. But what's being built in our region is a historical heritage representation of what was, and what was includes other elements. So I get it shouldn't be in the items of significance, but I think it's important to, what I'm hearing, at least from some of our board members, and maybe we could open it up, is that as this development is built, how do we make sure that there is proper acknowledgement to Squamish Nation and the traditional territory on which this development or this mine was originally built and this development is getting done on? Where, not in the items of significance, where can we have that conversation, that truth and reconciliation conversation? And I don't mean to put you on the spot, Ms. Needham. The question is open for anybody. I think, yeah, that's it. Thanks.
I think it's a really good question. And I think Vivian had something. Sorry, Director Birch-Jones, go ahead.
Thank you. And I'm glad we're having the conversation, because you really do have to think about the truth and reconciliation in every single action. And this is a big one. If nothing else, the title should be changed. If we're going to call things, put historic context as the title, or, list of significant sort of things, then we have to be inclusive. Or change the title and narrow it right down to what it is.
Okay, thank you. Director Crompton, go ahead.
I just join my voice to Director Richmond's that I think that this may not be the place. It may also be the place. I think if we're going to be speaking historical context, we should speak historical context. And so I hope we do find a place for it here or somewhere else. And I'd be happy to make a resolution of the same if the board feels like it's required. But I also trust staff to take that away and do something with it.
I agree. Sorry, Director Weeb, did you have your hand up? Okay. I do agree that there needs to be some form of formalized process to preserve the historical values of any of these developments, especially, well, especially always, but especially now. But in the context of considering a tax exemption based on this historical value, that is a piece of, you know, when we provide tax exemptions, it's usually in the acknowledgement of community benefit it's I think it shows our recognition of the historical value. We've made a commitment as a region, as an organization, to take seriously the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We're declaring potentially later on in this meeting, talking about Truth and Reconciliation Day for September 30th. So we can't in the same breath not acknowledge the historical value and the long-standing history of the property. Go ahead, Director Needham.
Yeah, just if one turns to page 26 of the statements of significance, there is reference to use of the site by natives as a source of red ochre, or the area, I should say, as a source of red ochre for pigment and for paint and dyes. It states that there was long-term presence in the area, documented by petroglyphs that were north of Furry Creek on the eastern shoreline of Howe Sound. There's talk more about the red ochre and how that all worked. So there, you know, there is a discussion of the use of the area by First Nations, but primarily this site, the bulk of the history that is specific to the Heritage Revitalization Agreement, the bulk of the history that we're talking about was the mining community that settled and worked at the Britannia mine. So that is why the statements of significance primarily focus on that early mining town history.
Okay. Director Crompton, go ahead.
Has that language been vetted by the Squamish Nation?
No, we don't refer statements of significance to the Squamish Nation. This project was referred to the Squamish Nation when it went through rezoning, and we received no comments back.
Okay. Director Richmond, go ahead. Mike, go ahead.
Sorry. Maybe in the interest of moving forward and separating things a little bit, I would be, if this makes sense, and I don't know if it works, prepared to support the recommendation and that's as presented. If we consider a follow-up motion that, you know, personally, before we actually consider any number or terms on a tax exemption, I would like to understand better from the developer how First Nations history will be represented on the site, and if that's been, you know, spoken about with Squamish Nation leaders. So if it makes sense, you know, the items of significance, which we're being told really have to do with the design of the structures and all that sort of thing, I'm happy to support that, but I would like to see a stop point until, and maybe it's been presented and I've forgotten, I just want to hear it again, but I'd like to understand perhaps what the developer is considering for representation of Squamish Nation history on the site. So maybe it's comes forward, we let the developers know, and that comes forward with the tax exemption report. I don't know.
Okay, Director Needham to respond.
Yeah, I just would like to remind the board that development permits have already been issued for this project. So for both the residential and the commercial site, we have issued development permits. So those are those are done, and really that's the place where we would include any sorts of reference to, I don't know, like a plaque or something to the First Nations. But this particular aspect is really not going to change the development per se. What the heritage revitalization does is it requires that the structures uphold the defining character elements of the town. That's all. It's not requiring that there be changes to development permits or getting into rezoning the land or doing anything else. This is simply to ensure that the character elements of the existing buildings are maintained. That's all. In these heritage statements of significance, this particular consultant, Don Luxton, has added a lot of history to his report. However, these sorts of detailed historical studies are not necessarily needed for a statement of significance. Basically, all he really had to do was submit the drawings of the historic buildings and state their defining elements. So I think we may be getting a little bit sidetracked by the history that he's provided in this. That's really extra. All he really needed to do was do what's done in the statements of significance themselves, which is to describe the buildings, their dates of construction, give a sort of a heritage value to those structures, and define their character elements. So I just think that we really should be focused on the statements of significance rather than the historical aspects that have been added to this particular report, which is very thorough. But again, this isn't meant to sort of go beyond those parameters.
Okay, Director Birch Jones, then Director Mack.
Thank you, Chair. And, this was a really interesting report to read, and I'm happy to see this preservation of this heritage site. It's a really cool thing. I love it there. I like stopping. I think if we're going to title things like historical context and, list of significance, we need to narrow that title or focus that title. So historical context of mining in this particular place during these years, like just get it a little bit more specific. Otherwise, the grandiose titles are insulting to the First Nations. So that's my comment.
Director Mack.
Yeah, after all the discussion, I would move, do I move one that or all of the that's? Can we move them all at the same time?
Director Clark. Yeah, we can move them all together.
Okay, well, I'll make that motion that we move them all together.
Okay, moved by Director Mack. Do I have a seconder? Director Demare. Any further discussion? Director Richmond, is your hand still up or? No, okay. Any further comments? Director Pettengill, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate the discussion. I think I'm not quite ready to support this. I think for me, even without the background report, we are saying this is history. It's a heritage agreement defining what history is. And, there are maybe different ways to tackle it, but I am, especially maybe given the discussion, very concerned about setting that stamp of this is heritage. I think in today's context, we have to have a pretty broad and thorough discussion about what is heritage. What are we taking the time and resources to identify as heritage? And I'm not sure that this is complete enough for me to say that. And, you know, I love going to Britannia, and so I don't want to sort of dismiss the general plans or dispute the building permits and so on, but I don't think we're taking enough care in addressing and identifying heritage and history personally.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, Director Demare?
Thank you, Chair Ford. Just listening to all the comments and where could this go? And maybe it's in the development permit process. The developer has to create a history, a First Nations history for that area in consultation with the First Nations. So it's documented that way, right at the start of these development permits. We got the same issue with the fine piece. You know, what was the historical nature to that property? We don't know. So maybe it's at the development permit. I'll just leave it at that.
Well, we've issued the development permits for this property, but I think it's
in the
a
future.
resolution. Yeah, and I think a resolution in the future to establish a historical and heritage properties or some form of discussion on a high level policy, I think is suggested here. That makes some sense. Director Richmond, did you have a comment?
I'm trying to find a balance here in that, you know, we're this far along in the process, development permits have been issued. I get all that, and I certainly don't want to get in the way of that. And I, for the most part, really like the project. But I just we don't have a second chance to get this right and make sure that, you know, this development in our region is, you know, inclusively representative. And so, you know, I would be happy to support this resolution if the titles were slightly altered to be a little more specific, as Director Birch Jones has suggested, as well as if there's, you know, for me to consider, you know, terms on a tax agreement, a tax deferral agreement, which is coming next in September. I would like to have staff ask the developers how they are intending on representing Squamish Nation history on the site. I think it's a fair question, and it will definitely inform my decision when it comes to how much of a tax exemption I'd like to consider and what terms. So you know, in the interest of moving forward, and again, I recognize the development permits been given. You know, if it's a slight change in title to be a little more representative, and then the other steps I described, then I would support it. Thank you.
Okay, as we have a motion on the floor to first, second, and third reading and referral, many comments here indicate that the board desires a conversation with the developer to acknowledge what has been raised. So we do have this coming back for adoption at some point. Would anyone like to make an additional resolution after this to refer staff to have that conversation with the developer and bring it back before adoption? Is that acceptable to the board? Okay. Director Needham, I saw your hand up if you had clarification or if there was an error.
Actually, no, I don't have anything more to say.
Okay. Anyone else? Director Crompton, go ahead.
Yeah, I just need to be clear. I don't like the language that's in this document. I think the idea that we would not be talking about specific people who are there, and there's this sort of, and so I hope that future reports that are brought back either will be more specific. And I understand that this is consultant work, that, but I hope that in the future we don't see this kind of language in reports that we receive.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so I'm calling the question on the first, second, and third reading and referral, and that staff be directed to bring back a tax exemption bylaw to the September board meeting. Is there anyone opposed? Director Pettengill is opposed, and Director Richmond, can you lower your hand, or are you opposed? Okay. Director Pettengill is opposed. Thank you. Oh, and Director Birch Jones. Okay. Thank you. And we're now on 7.2, which is a request.
So is that, I didn't hear the inclusion. I thought there was going to be a follow-up resolution.
Yes.
Okay.
Follow-up resolution. Did you want to make that resolution?
Yes, I would like to move that staff ask the developers to inform us what plans are to show historical representation of Squamish Nation and traditional territories on the development, and that come back prior to adoption or to tax exemption.
Thank you. So Director Clark, do you have the wording that you need there for that motion? Do I have a seconder for that motion? Director Herford, do you have a comment? You're just seconding it? Okay. Any discussion on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Director Richmond. I appreciate that. Okay, now we'll go on to 7.2, which is a request for decision on officer designation and delegation of authority, and I believe CAO Helmer will speak to this.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, briefly, this report is brought forward with the bylaw attached to update the officers' bylaws that we have. The three are quite old, and there has been changes to the legislation. In addition, there is the recent appointments of deputy and alternate deputy positions that this bylaw would now cover off. So the wording of the bylaw has been updated to reflect that, updated to reflect the legislative changes, and to provide overall authority as to what the delegated authorities are for the CAO, the corporate officer, and the finance officer. And with the CAO officer bylaw, which is also attached as one of the attachments, merged into this report to reflect the overall responsibility for management of the staff and administration. And also there's a piece in there that if there are time-sensitive legal matters that would expire prior to a board meeting, that they could be actioned and then brought forward to the board for a full update and further direction so that we don't miss our timelines. So that's the basic elements that are included into that report. If the board is adopting it, it will also rescind the three older bylaws that were attached for reference, and available for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Director Birch Jones, go ahead.
I was wanting to move adoption.
Okay, I just want to hear if there's any questions first. I'll come back to you. Seeing no other questions, so we have the recommendation is moved by Director Birch Jones. Do I have a seconder? Oh, Director Clark, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to clarify that we're doing the first three readings as its own resolution, followed by the adoption. Thanks.
Okay, so to be read a first, second, and third time, moved by Director Birch Jones, seconded by Director Wiebe. Anyone opposed? Oh, motion carry. Sorry, Director Mack, did you put your hand up? Okay. And then could I have someone move adoption? Moved by Director Birch Jones, seconded by Director Pettengill. Any further discussion? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And then we have Ms. LaFrance joining us for 7.3. Director LaFrance has entered the room, but we don't see you.
Sorry.
No problem. Thank you very much for being here today. We are on 7.3. Request for decision for loan authorization bylaw regarding the Howe Sound East Fire Protection Service. I'll turn it over to you.
All right, so I'm the Director of Finance, Suzanne LaFrance, and this loan authorization bylaw is to allow the Howe Sound East Fire Service to replace their Quint. So this bylaw can be for a used or a new fire truck up to 1.2 million. And it's a requirement for this service to continue as per the budgets as laid out as well. So there's an AAP process that is required for approval of this LA bylaw before the board can approve the bylaw itself. So the report lays out the steps involved with that. At the very end of the report shows the final steps to be taken after this first 3 readings. And if there's any questions from the board, I can take them.
Okay, any questions from the board? Director Herford, then Director Pettengill, go ahead.
Thank you. There was a mention of the reserve of $200,000 being obviously clearly not enough to replace the vehicle. In planning for the next replacement, will it be another, I guess, 2-part question? Where is that fund, and is it that fund in future intended to replace this new vehicle in the appropriate lifespan, 25 years or whatever, or is that some other fund? It just struck me as being off by a substantial amount. So could you speak to that?
Sure, yeah. So yeah, the capital reserve amount was only about 202,000. And we will strive to increase that as our asset management processes are being approved and being addressed. It will take an increase to tax revenue for this to happen. But so every year we look at what we can transfer to the reserve with the budget discussions. And we try to increase it as much as possible each year. Knowing that every 25 years, well, every 20 years, we may have to replace a fire truck. It can be extended to 25, hence that's why I use the 25-year term. Potentially, it will be another borrowing, but we will strive to get the reserve balances up to a place where we can use it for all capital needs.
Okay, thank you. And Director Pettengill, question?
Yeah, thanks. And I just wanted to dig in that 25-year timeline. Because when I look at the sort of where we are climate-wise, if small communities are still using diesel-powered fire trucks in 25 years, I'm not sure we survive that scenario. And then also looking at, BC and Canada as a laggard about no internal combustion engine vehicles by 2040, but that's still 6 years prior to the end life of this 25 years. And other jurisdictions are at, by 2025, there's no new ICE vehicles and so on. So I'm thinking about what's the availability of parts, what's the availability of fuel and so on. Even if it's not outright banned, can we service it? Is it realistic? And does it have any value? And so I guess I'm wondering, for something like this, shouldn't we be planning more like a 10-year or something? And so I'm just wondering about that, if staff can speak to that 25-year, does that really make sense? Or is it more prudent to look at a much shorter time frame?
Well, the 25-year is basically what the FUS requirements are for. So we basically, a fire truck can be a useful lifespan of 20 years, and that's regulated with the fire, whatever the FUS. I'm sorry, I'm not really keen on the lingo, but that's the regulation that we're going with. That's the current regulation. So that's why I picked 25, because you can extend it to 25, and 25 is the maximum term. So when we get a truck sourced, we'll look at how much we need to borrow, because we'll have a price, and what's the appropriate term. But this bylaw is for up to 25-year term.
Okay. I think that my question then is, should we be directing to source, sort of an interim vehicle until an appropriate electric vehicle is an option, rather than putting this sort of tax burden knowing that those vehicles will no longer be serviceable, whether there won't be a possibility of fueling it or replacing the parts on it over the next 15 years, it seems like now is a time. Yeah, is there any potential for looking at sort of a different type of vehicle that we would replace the current vehicle with?
I'm just the director of finance, so I can't answer that.
Okay. So essentially you need...
And essentially all I know is they would want a replacement with a similar quint. And that's right from the fire chief. Right. So, and I guess what we can do is have the fire chief come to a board meeting and discuss these with you next board meeting, but I don't know the availability of them, or I don't really know anything about this topic of having to go off of a gas-powered fire truck.
I appreciate that, Director LaFrance, and I really don't mean to put you on the spot like that. It's emerging times, and it's certainly a new way of discussing these things. I saw a comment from Director Mack.
Yeah, I don't think we should get ahead of ourselves with wanting to get to electric fire trucks now. I'm sure they're going to come at some point in time, but right at this point in time, they're not. So I think what they're asking for is a replacement for the vehicle they have to meet their underwriters' responsibilities, and that's a responsibility to the taxpayers. So I think we just need to move along with this as it is in this timeline. Thanks.
Okay. Director Pettengill, go ahead.
Yeah, and just to be clear, like, I'm not suggesting that we should sort of start searching for an electric fire truck right now necessarily, but I'm just wondering, given the context, if we should be doing our financial planning around a 10 or 15 year time frame rather than a 25-year time frame. And I guess that's my concern. What's the impact in 10 or 15 years if we go with spend 1.2 million, because that's what's available now, but in 10 years or 15 years it's no longer serviceable? Like, do the taxpayers have an understanding of what that hit will be?
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so unless there are other questions on the report, could I have someone make the motion as laid out? Moved by Director Crompton, seconded by Director Mack. Any further discussion? Seeing none, is there anyone opposed? Motion, Director Pettengill is opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Director LaFrance. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
We are on 8.1. Am I right about that, Director Clark? Have I missed anything? Okay. 8.1 CAO verbal update.
Thank you, Chair. The only thing that I had to report today, it actually relates to an item that you have further down on your agenda. There's a response from BC Emergency Health Services. I had a meeting with BC Emergency Health Services together with the CAOs from Lillooet Nation and the village of Pemberton. And it was good news. One of the BCEHS people said it's the most monumental change he's ever seen in the overall impact to the province. The benefit for the village of Pemberton is they're intending to move from having people available only on weekdays to having people available 24/7, what they call an alpha ambulance service. And that's going to be a change from 2 FTEs up to 8 FTEs that will be on staff. And they have confirmed that the advanced paramedic in Whistler is being extended, and that the 3 surge ambulances are also being extended. So they will continue to be available, at least at this time, for transporting patients for that hospital transfers of patients. And they're also making changes to what basic paramedics can do so that they'll be able to support cardiac and pain management, and hopefully reduce the requirement for our medical professionals, the nurses and doctors, to have to travel with the patients for a lot of those patient transfers that do occur. So those are some definite changes that are going to benefit our regional district. And they have also expressed an interest in having a continued dialogue and collaborating with us to advocate for the continuation of those services for the corridor, because they recognize and agree that there's a significant importance in those services being available for the health and well-being of our residents. They did also mention Goldbridge and Seton Portage. We're going to have some benefits in terms of having on-call people stationed in their communities. So there was 2 different levels when they announced the changes that were coming. One was for these stations like Pemberton to have that alpha level. And then there was some of the stations to have regular on-call people to make sure that they are available to respond to calls in a timely fashion. And there were a couple of our communities that are going to benefit from that as well. So I just wanted to share that with the board. And I reiterated the board's desire to have them attend in person to take questions from the board. And we'll be bringing that back to the board as soon as I receive a response in that regard. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That's excellent news. I'm really, really happy to hear that they're putting this priority for our communities, because it has been certainly a challenge. Any questions on the CAO verbal update? Seeing no questions, could I have someone move receipt of the report? Moved by Director Weeb, seconded by Director Mack. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Now on 8.2, and we have Director Needham joining us again for this topic. Welcome back, Director Needham. We're on 8.2, looking for a request for decision on the electoral area C development variance permit number 160.
Thank you, Chair. Needham, Director of Planning and Development Services. So the DPP before you is for property on the Sioux River FSR. And the request is for a parcel line setback of 3.5 meters. Essentially to do with the terrain of the site. The property is as an isolated property. There are no near neighbors, and staff support the variance. We would also add to the recommendation that the CAO be authorized to sign the DBP permit. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Seeing no questions, would anyone like to make the motion as somewhat verbally amended to include the authorization for the CAO to sign the permit, which is moved by Director Mack, seconded by Director Demare. Further discussion? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And 8.3, Director Needham.
Yes, this is for a development permit for a property at Britannia Beach in Area D. The property was found to have construction without permits. Stop work order was issued to the property owners. The property owners do intend to apply for a building permit to justify the construction. However, they will require a setback variance in order for the construction to be to conform to our zoning bylaw. So they are requesting a 0.7 meter variance from the side parcel line. Staff are in support of this, and we are again recommending that the CAO be authorized to execute the permit. And if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay, thank you. Director Demare, questions?
Thank you, Chair Ford. Director Needham, were there any letters from the residents around
Nope,
the property?
No, we have not
We
received any
received any?
letters. No.
And the second question is, on that map, there were two properties or two areas that needed a variance.
Yes, they've opted to only request the one variance at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, could I have someone move the recommendation as laid out in the report that we approve the issuance of a development variance permit, and the CAO is authorized to execute the permit? Moved by Director Herford, seconded by Director Weeb. Any comments? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Director Needham.
Thank you.
Okay. So I want to do a temperature check of the room. We have a couple more reports. We do have staff presentations coming. Is anyone desperately needing lunch now, or shall we press on until 12:30, which is only 10 minutes away? But this next report could go longer than 10 minutes, but we're not on a time crunch with a delegation, as we usually have a delegation at 1 o'clock. We do not have that today, so we can push our lunch later. But I just wanted to check in with everyone. I don't see any resounding no, so let's bring Ms. LaFrance back in, and we will move on to 8.4 and 8.5. Hi. Director LaFrance, welcome back. We're discussing 8.4, which is an information report on the second quarter financials.
All right, so Suzanne LaFrance, Director of Finance. The second quarter financials look at the actual spend and the actual revenues from January to June 30th and comparing it to the annual budget. So the target is 50% remaining. And all of these reports have comments within each service and within each line. I'm just going to open up my report. Sorry, I wasn't prepared for this. It's always tricky with timing. I didn't see anything of significance for these Q2 financials. It's still a bit early in the year. The one thing that I noticed is the interest revenue on our investments is quite low this year, a lot lower than last year. So there potentially could be some deficits involved if the service relies a lot on interest revenue. I'll take some questions though from the board if there are any specifics.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing no questions. The report was very thorough. Thank you. Could I have someone move receipt of the report? Moved by Director Demare, seconded by Director Birch-Jones. Any comments? Director Mack? Nope. Okay. I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. 8.5 is the Gas Tax Community Works Fund top-up payment and updated project category eligibility.
Well, yes, this was a letter received from UBCM, basically stating that they're sending an additional top-up fund for 2021 year. Well, the year for the province is 2021 and 2022. And they actually expanded the eligible categories to include fire halls and fire station infrastructure. The catch on this is I reviewed a little bit more. The UBCM offered some examples for this new category, and they specifically state that it's not for fire truck replacements and only could do a fire truck replacement if it's in coordination with a fire hall renovation or a new fire hall construction. So one-off projects are also not applicable. They're looking for fire fire station, fire hall renovations, or construction. I'll take any questions if the board has any questions on this.
Any questions? Director Birch-Jones.
I'd be a bit interested to hear a little bit more about the examples that are okay. Thank you.
So basically what the UBCM stated was any fire hall renovation. So basically to expand the fire hall bays or any type of renovation required can be applicable to the gas tax fund now, and also new construction. So anything new that's coming along that's needed for a service can be used via the Community Works Fund.
Thank you. I'll follow it up.
Okay, any other questions? No, seeing none. Could anyone make the motion to receive the information? Moved by Director Crompton, seconded by Director Mack. Further comments? Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Director LaFrance.
Thank you.
Okay, we are on 8.6, and this is a request for decision to declare Truth and Reconciliation Day on September 30th as a public holiday. And is anyone speaking to this? Oh, we were looking for Ms. Olitsky for this.
Correct.
Should we take lunch and come back, and she can come back at that time? Okay,
That would be great. Thank you.
I'm imposing recess for lunch until 1 o'clock. Everyone good? Okay, turn off your cameras, turn off your mics, and eat some lunch and get outside and stretch your legs. Thank you very much. I'll call this meeting back to order. Hope everyone got some yummy lunch and outside time. And do we have Ms. Olitsky ready for this next topic, which is 8.6? Good afternoon, Ms. Olitsky. Welcome back. We're talking about 8.6, which is a new stat holiday. And I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to apologize in advance. There's some work going on in my apartment, so apologize if you hear some banging in the background. I'm Monica Halitsky, HR Manager for the SLRD. The report presented to right now is for the board to declare September 30th as Truth and Reconciliation Day for the SLRD. As outlined in the report, the federal government recently designated September 30th, National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, as a public holiday to commemorate and honor residential school survivors, their families, and communities. To support this action, to redress the legacy of residential schools and advance the process of reconciliation, the province of BC has advised the public sector to follow suit and observe the holiday. Public commemoration on this day is an opportunity to learn about and honor residential school survivors, their families, and communities. And it's an important action or step in the reconciliation process. Since 2016, the SLRD has proclaimed September 30th as Orange Shirt Day to acknowledge the harm caused by residential school systems and to honor survivors and families. By declaring Truth and Reconciliation Day as a public holiday, the SLRD will further enhance its commitment to the process of reconciliation by observing the day and participating in commemoration. This will include encouraging staff and the public to also reflect, expand their awareness on the history of residential schools, and participate in commemoration honoring survivors, their families, and communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from anyone on the board? Go ahead, Director Birch-Jones.
I just was pretty upset when I sort of read through this because I just don't see how a bunch of civil servants and government employees taking another stat holiday in a month that already has a stat holiday is in any way kind of even connected to reconciliation. But I also, on reading further, see that this comes from the top down, and we really don't have any choice in the matter, if I understand it. So I won't vote. I won't support it, but I think we have a lot of work to do in Truth and Reconciliation, and I'm not sure how a stat holiday is going to help us along the way. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, it has been declared by the federal government and by the provincial government. So it's sort of out of our hands. That said, I think your comments are correct that there is meaningful action and education for each of us to take on and to make use of this stat holiday in a way that means something to what it's being declared for, and that is to take seriously our own reflections. And are there any other questions from anyone for the staff? I have a question, and I think it's more for the board. Our board meetings are set well in advance, and in advance of this date being set by the federal government, our committee of the whole date is set in our meetings calendar as September 30th. So moving forward, September 30th wouldn't be considered on our future meetings calendar. We would probably have our meeting and committee of the whole the week prior to when this date falls. And so it won't be an issue next year, but for this year, we have to decide if we skip committee of the whole or if we move it to a different day in the week. And so that I will put forward as a separate resolution after we consider this declaration resolution. So I'll ask if anyone would like to make the declaration as laid out in the report. Moved by Director Demare, seconded by Director Herford. Comments on the declaration? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Go ahead, Director Clark.
Sorry about that, Chair. Is Director Richmond with us?
I believe so.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. So I have called the question. Director Birch-Jones, were you in opposition? Yeah. Okay. Okay. And now I'll open the discussion on either canceling the committee of the whole or moving it to another day in the week, or because it's not as if we ever have short agendas and we can jam it in on one day. And nor should we defer business that needs to be taken care of in a timely manner. I know that there is work to be done on the committee of the whole. So I would open it up for the board for consideration of moving it to Friday. Any comments or questions on moving committee of the whole to Friday, October the 1st? I know that there are a number of staff that work on a weekly or a bi-weekly Flex Friday situation, which then can be challenging. Director Birch-Jones?
I mean, certainly CEO Helmer or Monica Halinsky will know better than me, but when there's a stat holiday in the 2-week period, what happens with the flex? I do believe that if you're on a stat holiday, you're not earning time towards the flex. So will that flex disappear in that week if that's the way it falls? Or Have you thought that far? I'm sure you have.
I'll turn it over to the CAO or Ms. Halitsky.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The flex schedule as laid out, the flexes will still be falling on that Friday. And it's set out over the course of the year so that the staff are actually working slightly more hours on their flex schedule than they would on their non-flex. So it does cover off these slight variations if they occur. So it will still continue as scheduled.
Okay.
I'll just make a comment as well. There are a handful of staff who as normal flex day will fall on that Friday. If they do need to attend the meeting on that day, they could potentially take the flex day on a different day.
Okay. Director Crompton?
I believe we at the RMW may have a strat planning that day. Council strat planning.
On the 30th or the 1st?
On the 1st.
Oh, okay. So that would affect you and I. I mean, it's, go ahead, Director Birch-Jones. You're muted, Viv.
Thanks. Is the day before an option, the 28th? I know we have NDIT, but maybe the afternoon of the 28th, just to keep it beside the 29th, our regular meeting.
I think that's a council day. Pardon me.
Yeah, it's hard to change. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then I guess we need, because either way, we need a resolution to cancel the committee of the whole or to reschedule it. So we can make a resolution to reschedule it for an appropriate time that works with calendars. And we can follow up with the board with a calendar invite based on that. Does that work for you as far as a resolution goes, CAO Helmer? A resolution to reschedule?
Yes, we can send out a doodle poll to the board to find out their availability. Is there a date range you would like us, do you want it with from the Monday of the week of the board meeting through to the Friday of the week of the board meeting? And if we can get a successful time frame, then we proceed.
Yeah, I think so.
I believe
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
I believe I just lied. I apologize. It's the Friday the 22nd. So if the 1st works for everybody, then it works for you and I.
Okay.
I am sorry to provide bad information.
That's okay. This is, okay, good. So could I have a resolution then to reschedule the committee of the whole for the September? Moved by Director Birchstone, seconded by Director Crompton. Any comments? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Seletsky.
Thank you.
All right, we are now on 9.1 and we are, I'm not missing an 8.7, am I? No. 9.1 board roundtable. So let's start with, I'm going to go across my screen. Area A, Director Demare.
Thank you, Chair Porter. Just talking about reconciliation, we had honoring the First Nation missing children's event at the Hailmere Heritage Site this month, and it was we purchased a Every Child Matters flag, and we had a session where we raised the flag, and we had drumming, and it was very well attended. There was a truck, while all the fire raging throughout BC, a truck caught on fire at the top of the Hurley, and my son was here with our grandchildren. He was driving home over the Hurley. He saw it, and it was in flames, and he managed to get by it and down to cell service in the Pemberton Valley and phoned us, and we called BC Wildfire Service, and there was a Blackcomb helicopter went, but in the meantime, people that were on scene actually had shovels and so on and so forth, and to put the fire out. The ditching and the brushing that was done last year on that actually helped, because the person parked the vehicle right beside it, and yeah, we've got pictures of that event, and very fortunate that it was put out, didn't get into the woods. I'm with the Bylaw and repaving and survey that I didn't get further response on the first survey. So we're going to be sending out another second survey, and hopefully we get a lot more of the residents filling it. And that's for paving of all the other streets, Bylaw, to be able to get Maudie to come up and pave the main street, and see if they will also pave the other roads in Bylaw. We're planning a Fire Smart activity at Gun Lake with the Fire Smart SLRD Fire Smart contract that we have right now, Robin Strong, that's from Lillooet, and we're trying to do it on a private property. So we got Michael Fuchs on it also to deal with any issues related to being on that private property and doing that Fire Smart event. We've also had a young grizzly, about 3 years old. We've got around 240, 260 properties on Gun Lake, and it's been making its rounds right around the lake, probably about 7 times now. And actually, when I was out for lunch, I just went out down to our beach, and sure enough, there was some dropping from that young grizzly bear. So we did a pop-up event for Bear Aware with our Bear Aware contractor that we have here in Coastal Cascades, and it was really well attended. And we did bear spray training and talked about what to do and what not to do with that young grizzly bear. The conservation officer has been notified, of course, and he will try to scare it away, and hopefully it'll move on. But after going out for lunch, I know it's still kicking around our valley. So that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for your regular communication with your area on the truck fire. I thought was really interesting to follow you on Facebook on how you were communicating with constituents. That was really, really great. I'll go to Director Birch Jones, Area B.
Thank you. And Sal, you didn't come down for the meeting we had with WildSafe, but I did mention to Devin, our young WildSafe fellow. We met on August 4th. He had his supervisor here from Kamloops, and also Mary Lou was here, and Vanessa, I think. They'll be really interested to hear about the young grizzly if you haven't told them already, but you're just doing such great things with your Bear Aware. I don't think they're going to have much to add. We certainly have enough to keep them busy in Lillooet and Area B anyway. So it was nice. It was nice to see the staff here and meet with them. Devin's also made a couple of appearances, like at the farmers market and at an event for youth on swimming and safety related to opening our pool. Oh yeah, Barb, should I mention the pool? Like, oh my God, we're pretty close to 200 grand and there's water in the pool. Oh yeah, I have to talk about this. This is so exciting. We had sponsors like sponsor $1 a lap. I should have hit you guys all up, but anyway, it was $20 for 20 laps, and we've raised thousands more, and I swam 20 laps, and it was just Saturday, so it was reduced activity, masks, etc., but still we were able to have the swimmers in the pool and raise pretty close to, I'm sure, were there, and the pool is beautiful and it's got water in it and it's not leaking. Okay. I met up at Quatlanimo Lake with Rec Sites and Trails and Hacklip Band and the cabin owners. And after a few hours standing in what was still the blazing hot, smoky weather, we did come to some consensus, and there's going to be some small but significant improvements up at that rec site. I'm very glad about that because that's what the community of Hacklip wants. And there's also a whole bunch of protection there for the western toads, which I'm very excited about. We also, I was invited to the Squilex Chief and Council meeting. That was interesting for me because they wanted me to just call in, not on Zoom, but Teams, Microsoft. And so I was there on the screen and I could certainly hear and see them, and they could certainly hear and see me. So that little hybrid meeting, I was just thinking, well, this could work. This could work in our SLRD boardroom too. As long as you have the technical support. The fires, I'm so relieved. Thank you, Melanie and staff. I think I had good support and we did as well as we could under really absolutely terrible conditions. The devastation in Area B is so extensive. Of course, I haven't seen it yet, but I know how bad it is and the amount of habitat and forests and so on. And I'm wondering, you know, all those lines that were dug that are just there calling out for invasive weeds to come and spread in a nice line, et cetera, how that rehabilitation and reforestation happens. I'm interested in learning more about all of that. Yeah, thank you. I'll stop.
Thank you. Lillooet, Director Weeb.
Boy, what can I say? I mean, she was so excited over the pool. We're all excited over our swimming pool. And we actually have lifeguards in training and all kinds of programs set up. It's just, things have taken off phenomenally there. Director Birch Jones forgot to mention our Freeman Awards, probably because she was one of the recipients for all the good deeds she's done over the years with volunteering and just everything in general. And for anybody who remembers her first coming to the SLRD board with her bad hip and her hiking boots and all of that, she actually wore a dress. I was just in awe. Just have to put a little bit of levity in there. It's just, yeah. I also was in a SOGA meeting this morning that we have some issue, nothing with the boots on the ground for the fire or anything, but we had a discussion on what didn't work and what doesn't work and where we can start that conversation and with whom. And we started it this morning with Brian Frankel. So I'm really glad he was on Zoom with us earlier today. And I know it's going to be a discussion at our council table at our next council meeting. And I'm not really sure that we feel that it's a district responsibility. And I'm kind of leaning more to the region SLRD should be in there and the TNRD and whatnot. We were informed this morning that the helicopters and planes and whatnot, the pilots that have the best view of most of the forest fires going on do not have any input into how things are managed, which just totally blew me away. I thought, they're up there for hours on end, back and forth, and they're never asked what, you know, their opinions or how to take care of things or whatever. So I was thinking on the way of disasters, like, could we as a region do something as a regional district, you know, to bring this forward I know it's a little late this year for UBCM, but I think it's something that we need to keep in our sights. And then it was also brought up about flooding and landslides and whatnot, just natural disasters in general, and the permits. Like by the time you get your permits and whatnot to be able to do things, things are already on their way to being flooded. So if we can somehow bring something forward to do that a little sooner, to be able to get these permits, I mean, the people that live here know what's going on and what's going to happen and what's going to happen after the forest fires and so on and so forth. And other than that, Lillooet is basically smoke-free. We've got a little bit of snow on the mountains over there, which is kind of neat. And I see a lot more animals coming into town. I had a bear in my plum tree. He cleaned everything off but 3 plums, broke a branch, thought, oh, well, I'll save those 3 plums. But he came back the next night and left me a nice a nice gift. And we've also had coyotes in the backyard. So, you know, they're moving on from the fires. They're just, you know, they've got to go somewhere. That's about it for Lillooet today.
Thank you. Let's go to Area C, Director Mack.
Thank you. I just want to thank somebody for sending us the change in the weather, the rain that we had. It definitely, it's nice. This is the best time of the year. But to the point that Barb made about the helicopter pilots and whatnot, we did have a fire up behind our place here, and the helicopters were actually landing in one of my fields, using it as their landing zone. And the crews actually stayed here at our place. And in talking to those guys, they made the same comments. There's got to be a wholesale change in the way the BC Wildfire Service operates. They need to take a step backwards, and they need to talk to some of those old retired people that were in their service and get some information from them on how they used to get everybody involved. The forest companies were involved. Everybody was involved immediately. Now they won't do that, and I think it has a lot to do with unionism and all that. I'm hoping I'm wrong, but I don't think so. But going forward, they just have to change their whole idea of how to fight these fires. Like I was told 3 years ago when we had our fires here then, that they don't fight fires anymore, they manage them. And I asked the question, how the hell do you manage a fire? You put it out, that's how you do it. And you have to do it immediately, not after it's got to the point where you can't put it out. And that's what happens. They let these things burn to see what's going to happen. And then they get right out of control. And then nothing but nature will put them out. So anyways, that's a whole other story. Area C, we've been very fortunate this year. We've had some small lightning strikes, which were dealt with immediately. We've had some really heavy rain. So that dealt with them. Neff Creek, which I'm sure you know that we had that large landslide come down through that and cut the road off. That happened again, not to the extent it was about, didn't quite make it over the road, but trying to get highways to deal with that is another issue. I've got Sarah working on that, but so we've already had one of those landslide debris flows, and I would suspect that that's going to be an ongoing problem in that particular area. There's so much material up high that's going to come down. But other than that, I'm looking forward to the fall. I think all our residents are. It's just a nice time of the year. So hopefully everybody enjoys it. Thank you.
Director Richmond from Pemberton.
Thanks. We just had about 3 weeks off from council break, and we're back at it next Tuesday. So that was good for staff and council, I'm sure. And in the meantime, it's been a hot, busy summer. We've been super fortunate, as Russell mentioned, in our valley here. Not only have we had few fires, we've had very little smoke even. So thinking of you guys up north through it all, but we were very fortunate. But just dealing with really hot, dry conditions like everyone else. The farmers were struggling a lot with it this year. There's a water shortage and water usage issues throughout the valley. But all in all, pretty good summer, a very busy summer. A lot of our businesses most of our businesses are dealing with the staffing shortage that seems to be everywhere, especially in frontline service industry, which has been a real struggle for a lot of operators who were very much looking forward to, and I'm sure Director Compton can attest to, looking forward to this summer to stop the bleeding of the last year and a half and start to reset financially, hopefully, maybe make $1. And then we end up with crazy heat and extreme staff shortages, which has been a real challenge for a lot of business operators. Yeah, I think that's all I've got. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll go to Director Crompton.
I just wanted to note how wonderful it was to celebrate Graham at his celebration, and it was nice to see everyone. And Russell and I had a chance to chat, and he said to me later how nice it was to just be in person. And I just can't agree more. Like, we've been like this for so long that seeing a bunch of people who you care about and you've worked with for a long time, and to be able to celebrate someone who's meant so much to this region was really nice, personally, and I think corporately as well. So that was great, I thought. To Director Richmond's point, it has been so difficult for businesses in this community to go from having no one here to having huge numbers of people here without the ability to actually take advantage of that, because there just aren't enough staff. A lot of people have left the hospitality industry altogether, and that's not just a problem for Whistler and Pemberton and Squamish. It's a problem across Canada and around the world, that it's going to take some work to get us back to where we were as far as people engaged in the industry. So a lot of work going into that, a lot of work going into understanding how these new mandates will impact how we do tourism. It will be challenging. And so minds being put towards how we do that well. Our housing projects are moving a million miles an hour. If you're ever in Whistler, give me a call, and I'd love to take you on a tour of our WDC WHA site that just feels like we're moving quickly, which is exciting. I always drove past Squamish over the last couple of years and just felt jealous about all of the housing that was going in. And now it's nice to be able to see a bunch of that ourselves. And then just grateful, I guess, that we have had very little smoke in our community. In the last 4 years, we've had a lot, and every time I'm grateful for that, I think about those communities in our province that have had a lot of smoke and a lot of fire this year, and it's been very difficult. So, and then one final thing, tons of road construction in our town over the last few months, like tons. And so it'll be nice to have that finished and being able to move on.
Great, thank you. I had the pleasure of attending a art installation unveiling at the BC Hydro building in Pemberton on Astor Street. and with Director Mack, and the artist Levi Nelson was there sharing his piece that BC Hydro had commissioned him to do, and it is spectacular. I encourage everyone to take a look to your right when you drive into the SLRD office the next time to have a look at that piece, because it is something else. And we got to chat with the artist and his family. His mom was there, so proud, and wishing him well on his next journey into education. And yeah, it was really, really special to be there for that. I also had an opportunity to drive around the region. I went north farther than I've gone before, which was kind of cool. I went on a family vacation, and but it was sobering to see the fires that Vivian is looking at every day and that Sal is dealing with every day. So it was a good reminder to get out into the region and see this beautiful territory that we have the privilege to steward. We are very, very lucky. I will turn it over to Squamish. Who would like to go first? Director Pettengill or Director Herford? Tell us about Squamish. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Just a few brief things, and I'd like to echo some of my colleagues' thoughts, especially around the tourism sector and some of the challenges there. We have taken the month of August off of council meetings as we normally do, but our staff has stayed busy, and incredibly thankful of especially our emergency operations center staff. And in the region too, I spent a lot of time looking at the wildfire map with a lot of anxiety and watching what's happening. And it has been very comforting to know that we have such strong staff on these files. We've been running some cooling centers during the heat domes, and then just dealing with the fires. We've been very lucky in Squamish as well. A couple of fires did start, but were put down in fairly short order. Just, you know, watching Area B especially, and great deal of concern and for what's happening there, and not sure sort of how we move forward just as a province in the light of these sorts of fires on an ongoing basis. So it's been a sobering month, as well as a bit of time off. Upcoming, we have a neighborhood plan for the Garibaldi Estates neighborhood that's already generating a lot of discussion. I think not everyone realizes this is the neighborhood's real opportunity to define what their neighborhood's going to be into the future. So there's been some discussion about that already, and I think there will continue to be a lot of discussion on that topic. Just speaking about fire, last year, our council had the opportunity to put on fire gear and do fire training for the day. And it was really quite an eye-opening experience. When you have to wear that gear, for anyone who hasn't, it really changes the game. And I just had no awareness of that beforehand. And I don't think that full experience is available to the public, but yesterday and today, and then next week as well at Brenham Park, our fire department has been doing public fire practices to give the public some sense of what the fire department is dealing with. And so that's just a bit of a taste of what's happening, and it's going to get real busy real soon. Thanks.
Go ahead, Director Herford.
Thank you. I'll take the opportunity to thank all of you for welcoming me to my first SLRD meeting. I think Councillor Pettengill sort of summed up the majority of it. I'll add a couple of thoughts. Normally on the BC Day weekend, we have a Squamish Days Festival in town, which involves a big logger sports show, and every service group in the community sort of getting together to run a part of their weekend. So this year, as with last year, it was canceled, and I don't often get those BC Day weekends off, so I did travel as well. I did witness some of the fires outside of Lillooet, visible sort of from the pavilion zone when I was going through, and it was yeah, amazing. I'm glad that for the most part, everyone was safe and came through that. But I'm curious to see what lessons can be learned from the fires in those areas to hopefully lessen the impact to all of us, both from fire and smoke as well. But on September 18th, so coming up, will be a Squamish Days rescheduled. So if you're around and you can't make it in the summer, it's guaranteed to be a sunny day, apparently, on September 18th. And we can be the return of the Logger Sports Show and can continue on the 60+ year tradition of that. So I'm looking forward to that upcoming, and invite everybody on the call and anyone watching this on replay to come to Squamish on the 18th, and provided that obviously that the restrictions don't move too far and we can't do it, but that's the plan at this point. So hope to see everyone there, and thank you again for having me.
It's great to have you here. Thank you so much. Great. Well, I think we've reached everyone. So we'll move along to 9.2, which is a request for PILT funding to be approved by the board on behalf of Director Rainbow and Director Elliott. This is, well, the report is there for your consideration. I don't think I need to speak to it, but can I have someone, or is there any questions for staff? Seeing none, would anyone like to make the move the recommendation? Moved by Director Birch-Jones, seconded by Director Wiebe. Is there any further discussion on this? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. 9.3 is the Old Braylorn Museum site picnic tables, and this is a report from Director Demare, and I'll let you speak to it, Director Demare.
Thank you, Chair Ford. Yes, I was notified of the 2 picnic tables that are at that site, and we needed to get them removed because they were a safety hazard. And in the meantime, I contacted BC Hydro. You've seen the picture of the picnic table at the BC Hydro rec site at Gun Creek, and I was actually able to get the drawings for that table, and they're also wheelchair accessible. That's what they call them. They're wheelchair accessible picnic tables. And I'm going to be going out and having our grant writer, Lori Reimer, look for some funding for it. There's lots of accessibility funding available. As an example, the Bridge River Valley Community Association was able to get $39,000 funding for accessibility to the new, the old Braylor Pioneer Mines office gets built. That's part of the funding that they got, and so that will also be wheelchair accessible. So it's something that I've been working on. I've also, with the trail committee, I wanted to build a couple of wheelchair accessible trails also in the valley. I think this all combined will help our community move forward with that whole concept. Thank you. And I'd like to move that motion.
Great. I have a mover. Do I have a seconder? Director Crompton, any questions or comments from the board? My only comment is that accessibility isn't just for wheelchairs, it's for all kinds of accessibility issues. And we're extremely lucky in this province to have some really progressive new legislation on accessibility measures. And so I'm really grateful that you're putting your thoughts and work into this, because this will go a long way for inclusion in our communities and seeing this beautiful area that you are in. So thank you very much. Any further comments? Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Director Demare. Now we will move on to correspondence for action. 10.1. This is a referral for comment, and this is the Metro Vancouver Regional District draft. This is their Metro 2050, which is the official name of their RGS. Any questions before we move this? Are there any comments from anyone that we would like to share with them in respect of this referral? Director Pettengill.
I had a couple. I'm not sure they would be from the perspective of encouraging them to set that leadership that we would follow, as opposed to they specifically impact our interaction with them. So I'm not sure if those are included in the sort of comments we want to provide or not.
Yeah, I think so. I think what we have the opportunity to write a letter as a board and share our thoughts on this. It's not necessarily how we interact with them, but this, if it was us, we would be referring it to them and they can share their thoughts on our RGS. So this is an opportunity, if there's something about it that you'd like to commend them, or if you'd like to put forward considerations, now's the time for us to make that motion as a board to send a letter to that effect. So if you want to share those now, we can record them and create a letter.
Sure. A couple of thoughts I'll try then. One, overall, their attention to the climate emergency, I think, was quite striking, and I was very pleased to see how much attention they're paying there, as well as just their thought towards managing the population growth in a somewhat sustainable way. A couple things jumped out at me, though. They talk about considering support for provisioning childcare space, and just from all the conversations I've heard, that it's not something we can consider. We just need to do it, I think, everywhere. And then similarly, in terms of green infrastructure, they suggest considering the use of green infrastructure, and I think that just has to be what you do, full stop. And then it was one striking thing that was missing for me is avoidance of new fossil fuel infrastructure. And so sort of explicitly stating we want to develop without increasing that dependence. And the last one, it's a little harder to articulate, but just trying to not get caught up in the net zero thing where we're purchasing offsets and so on. I think the goal needs to be towards sort of zero or minimal emissions, full stop, and not sort of thinking in terms of offsetting and purchasing and so on, these sort of schemes. But overall, I thought it was a very strong plan.
I agree with you. Thank you very much for those thoughts. Does anyone have anything that they would like to add or debate? Seeing none. Do we make a motion now looking to CAO Helmer or Director Clark? Do you have enough notes as far as what this letter could look like, CAO Helmer?
Thank you, Chair. I think it would be good if the board could make a motion to refer this matter back to staff, and we'll capture what we've understood and make sure we're reflecting that correctly before the letter goes out. We do have a bit of time in this case.
Okay. Can I have someone make that motion? Moved by Director Birch-Jones, seconded by Director Herford. Further comments?
Thank you for that. I'm happy that we're putting those comments forward. I appreciate the time you took.
Yes, I do too. Okay, no further comments. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, 10.2. This is a request for a letter of support from the Coastal Community Network regarding commercial salmon fishing closures. Any questions for staff or questions about the letter? Seeing none. Would anyone go ahead, Director Birch-Jones?
Is that the salmon runs are in such a critical state here. Our First Nations are shutting down their own food fisheries on the river. Everyone has to make sacrifices here.
Yeah. Would you like to make the motion that we send the letter of support? No?
No, I don't think so, because they're asking to have the directives closing the fishing repealed. So I'm actually not.
Oh, I'm sorry, I read that backwards. Director Pattengill?
Yeah, just I didn't have a concise suggested resolution, but I think along the lines of what Director Birch-Jones was saying, for me, just sort of a blanket asking the province to repeal what they've done doesn't make sense. But I think, you know, asking the province and DFO to look at better management of the fish stocks and where they're putting their money, perhaps it does make sense to provide some subsidization or funding to the coastal communities during this period, instead of things like TMX and so on that are threatening the salmon and making it worse. So maybe a letter sort of outlining some of these things makes more sense than a blanket support.
Okay, Director Mack?
Yeah, like I really think that if we've got to this state where they want to close commercial salmon fishing, there's a real problem. And I see that, you know, over the years, ever since DFO took over the management of our West Coast fishery, we've gone downhill totally. And for example, the fish hatchery that we have in Naquatco and Darcy, it's been closed now for 3 years, and they wanted to close it 10 years ago, and the band, you know, fought for it, and others did too, and then they did keep it open. But now that the runs that are in there, the spawning channels, need to be rehabilitated, they won't put any money towards that. So the channel's been closed for 3 years. There's a very good run that comes in here, especially every 4 years we get a huge run. And they're doing nothing about it. So right now, those fish that would normally get directed into the spawning channels are just being allowed to go up Gates Creek and then go off onto side creeks, which is a wonderful thing, but you don't get near the amount of fry going back out. So, you know, for them to, I think they've just mismanaged the whole resource to a point now where it's in serious trouble, obviously. But I think we need to forcefully say that we want proper management of these wild fish stocks. And one thing they could start doing is opening up all these hatcheries that they've closed down over the years. It makes no sense whatsoever. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so what we can do is we can receive this for information, or just make a motion to receive the letter, not write the letter of support, and then direct staff to write a letter on behalf of the board, given the commentary that we've just had. Does that work for you? Anyone? Yep. Can I have someone make the motion that we direct staff to write a letter of our own? Moved by Director Birch-Jones, seconded by Director Mack. Commentary?
And we could Cohen, it's well worth following. It's about 50 flipping years old now, I think.
Okay, any other comments? Director Clark?
Thanks, Chair. Who would you like this letter sent to? And so just a letter just reflecting the comments, requesting better management of the.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you could just clarify to whom, thanks.
DFO? Yeah, to the Department of Fisheries. Director Mack?
Yeah, definitely to DFO, but I would also say to the federal and provincial fisheries ministers, because if it just goes to DFO and we're criticizing them, we may never see anything come of it. So I'd like it go to them, but also to the fisheries ministers of the federal and provincial government. Thank you.
Okay. Have we captured that? Any final comments? Is there anyone opposed? Thank you. I appreciate that. Motion carries. 10.3, the CN consultation on extreme weather plan. So this is, well, it's backdated. I know that we still have an opportunity to share our feedback on their extreme weather plan, just not on their online form, but I know that we can still communicate with them. I've had fairly regular email back and forth with CN. So I will open it up to comments or questions on their extreme weather plan. Go ahead, Director Mack.
Excuse me. So on our line through the corridor here, when they decided to reopen this line to use, which hasn't been really heavily used, but one of our concerns at the time was vegetation. So what they did was they sprayed the vegetation. So now what we have lining both sides of the tracks is dead vegetation. So dead vegetation burns way easier and, well, it's just easier to light on fire than green vegetation. So the way they did it was not really the most effective way of doing it. I think they just need to think about that, because what they've done now is they've put flammable material, like really flammable, right up against the tracks. And that to me, like when I drove in yesterday, I saw it on the way in and I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I paid attention on the way back, and it's all the way like from Pemberton to Darcy here. And I'm sure it's all the way through the corridor, because I'm sure they sprayed it all. So I think they have to maybe change their thought process and how they deal with some of this stuff. Anyways, I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Pettengill, go ahead.
Thanks. And just to add to Director Mack, I think I read in the report, they said when we spray it, it decays within 2 weeks. And so it's, you know, I think their position is not really an issue, but I think we're hearing it is. And so it is maybe worthwhile reiterating our concern there. And then it also mirrors, and I think we've maybe raised it with CN, concern that I hear about glyphosate usage. I believe their position is, well, you know, we're allowed to, so it's fine. But what I hear from constituents is they don't think it's fine, regardless of what the federal regulation is. And so it's maybe another reason for them to reconsider spraying, how they're spraying and how they're dealing with this vegetation along the tracks. I don't think, from what I'm hearing, people are happy with their approach.
Yeah, I agree. Any other comments? So I miss, I was looking at August 26th saying that was last month, but we're not in September yet. So tomorrow is the deadline for us to share our feedback. So could I have a resolution to, and this would obviously be pretty quick turnaround, but I think there's some good concise feedback here for staff to put into the online form, which closes tomorrow. Could I have a motion that we share our feedback, moved by Director Mack, seconded by Director Pettengill. Further comments? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right. We're now on 10.4, the Pemberton Wildlife Association's shooting range property tax exemption. Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Director Mack.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to move this as presented.
Okay. Moved by Director Mack, seconded by Director Demare. Comments? Sorry, Director Clark.
Thanks, Chair. Just for clarification, that's a motion to bring back the bylaw to the next board meeting.
Okay, yeah, as presented. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Further comments, Director Birch-Jones?
Just, we're talking about the Pemberton Wildlife Association and the shooting range. And I've already asked them this before in the previous couple of years when they've asked for the same thing. And I'll ask again what their plan is for lead contamination on the site. I would really like to know what they're doing about that. And it's not the first time I've asked that question. So thank you.
Okay. So you could amend the motion to request that follow-up in advance of the bylaw being adopted. So what they're doing is we're going to bring this bylaw back for consideration at a future meeting to provide the tax exemption. Would you like to amend it? Is that fair, Director Clark, to add that amendment?
Thanks, Chair. I didn't have it moved, so it would just be,
oh, right.
It'll just be the, thank you.
Okay, so the motion then is to direct staff to bring back a bylaw to permit this tax exemption to a future meeting. And as a part of that, to ask the proponents to prepare a lead remediation plan for consideration of the board. Does that work? Director Mack?
Yeah, just thinking about that. That facility was designed and built for the Olympics. And it was built to military standards because the military actually built it. So I think we should just ask the Pemberton Wildlife Association just to let us know, was it built with that in mind? I know that all the berms and everything that were installed there, they trap anything that goes into those berms. So nothing is scattered all over the area. So maybe just ask them to provide us with details of how it was built and to what standards.
Okay. Does that work for you, Director Birch-Jones?
Almost. Yeah, that's a step in the right direction. And then I will ask the question about lead mitigation.
Okay. All right. So the motion on the floor is moved by Director Mack and seconded by Director Demare. Any further comments? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, 10.5. This is a request for support, and I believe CAO Helmer was going to speak to this.
Yes, I can. Thank you, Chair. We received this request from Talisker. We've been having several staff involved in having some dialogue with Talisker Resources. They would like to, as they outline, look at tying into our wastewater system over there. Currently, they are not within the service area for being able to do that. So that would involve an amendment to the service establishment bylaw, which of course is quite a time-consuming process and would probably put that particular opportunity in the same category as some of the other ones they're not interested in due to timelines. I did reach out to the Director of Governance at the Ministry of Municipal Affairs to find out if there was a way, because they're looking for really a term arrangement here, that we could have a service agreement with them and work with them to attempt to see if there's another way that we could do this, so that we're not held up for a lengthy period of time. There are a couple requirements that would need to be met. There are some final deficiencies that the contractor who put in the system has not fully completed, and those would need to be completed. And we would have to have a couple months of baseline data before we could do anything. In addition to that, I have not yet heard back from Municipal Affairs about whether there is an opportunity for us to look at another creative way of working with Talisker, or if we need to do a service establishment amendment, which would then have to be prioritized by the board and would affect the timelines that it would take a considerable amount of time, and they're hopeful for an immediate or as soon as possible solution. So there's a few pieces to be aware of there, but Talisker would like to request that there be direction from the board to allocate the staff time, because it's taking a fair amount of time to see what we can do to try to work with them and see if there's a solution that could be put in place. So I think that really what we would need is for this to be directed back to staff. And if the board is supportive, staff would invest the time in seeing what solutions could be available. And if so, then we could bring that back for further direction.
Okay, any questions? Director Demare.
Yeah, I think the study on the usage that currently is in place from the Braylorn residents for this past summer, because there was a number of people there, a lot of the non-resident property owners were there for the summer to see what the usage is, and I'd like to see a report on that usage compared to what the permit is allowed, in combination with what Talisker Resources usage is planned to be. They mentioned it in their letter, so that has to be part of it also. Yeah. So with that, I'd like to move what Melanie just said, is that we allow staff time to look at this and see where we can come up with and bring back the recommendations at a future board meeting.
Okay, moved by Director Demare, seconded by Director Pettengill, or is that a question? Go ahead, Director Pettengill, question?
Yeah, thanks. I just want to understand if staff were proceeding sort of in the normal priorities and normal order of operations, when or how would this get addressed? Because it sounds like they're asking for accelerated attention. So if it was just done in normal due course, what are we looking at there?
So the normal flow, through the chair, the normal flow of things would be an amendment to the service establishment bylaw. They are looking for wanting this to be in place for approximately a 1-year term. The service establishment bylaw, in a best case scenario, if this were top of the pile, is 6 to 9 months. We have to go out to the public and get public approval, and there's a legislative process with notice and everything involved before. So that would take quite a while. So it would be one of the items on that letter that they provided where they said, well, due to the time it takes in order to address this, it's not going anywhere. That would be the normal. And we're not even sure at this point if we can do anything different. We're waiting for word back on that. It's just that we're attempting, because Talisker is attempting to do something, we're attempting to provide that level of service to someone out there, if it's the board's desire for us to do that. It will impact some other work plan items, definitely, for a few departments by prioritizing this.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, yes, it does. I had another question is, normally with this sort of ask, would they not provide a report to the board from their perspective of what the impacts would be so we could make our decision, and then we might refer it to staff to do staff's own analysis or something? Or I guess, is it not normal, I guess, for them to provide a little bit more sort of rationale or to justify asking staff to do this work?
I suppose it's a little bit unique, but I think there's a lot of situations that come in that are unique, and staff have been having dialogue with them to work through this as part of our normal process, but what they're looking for really is above and beyond. So that's the reason why they've written a request to the board, because that means that the board has to have the awareness and be willing to say, hey, if that bumps some other priorities, we're accepting of that impact to the work plan of the different departments that are allocating their time to fulfilling this request.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? So the motion that Director Demare would like to make is to send staff away just to investigate how long this would take, wait for the response that you mentioned from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, and to come back to a future board meeting and tell us if this can fit into a work plan given the other priorities of the board. Is that correct? CAO Helmer?
Thank you, Chair. I think it would be maybe the Director Demare would want to clarify what his motion was, and and just to be sure I'm understanding correctly as
well. Okay.
Yeah, so the motion would be that there's a couple of things there that still need to be done. One is the usage report from this past summer, so that we don't, so that we know what the usage is, and to what our permit is and what's left in the permit. Because there's two pieces that they're talking about in their letter. One is, what they can do right now, and if need be, that treatment plant can be doubled, and that's another process. So we need to know exactly what the usage was this summer, and the staff has to get that, and also compare that to the permit and what the usage is that Talisker is requesting. The other aspect of it, as Melanie was saying, was that that whole process to be able to do this in less than 9 months. And I'd like to see these staff work towards that and see if anything is available to make this quicker process. If it has to go over to an AAP, then we're looking at quite a bit of time involved with it. The other thing I would like to see in the report back to the board is how many full-time jobs are local jobs as compared to the camp jobs where people are coming in and out. They do support our community very well. I'm positive for that, and I've seen some things that they've done. But the whole concept of a camp and people coming in and out, and compared to the permanent jobs that we have for our local people, I'd like to see that stat on it also in the report that's brought back. And hopefully the report could be brought back at our next board meeting.
Okay. CEO Helmer.
So that's kind of, that's kind of what I think that the board would need to make a proper decision whether to get this in #1 priority their work plan.
Okay. Now, the EAD has recently gone through a process of reprioritizing a bunch of work. And
That's
so do you feel that, yes, what you're proposing is to ask staff to come back and tell us how much work it will be, but how much work will it be to tell us that piece? And is that a top priority right now over all the other priorities that staff have to work with? I'm just asking the question of CAO or.
Well, I'm not sure how much time, I'm not sure how much time it would take to come back with some of the questions that I asked.
Okay.
I don't see it being that much work. So.
Okay. CAO Helmer.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I don't have Director Belsham here today to speak to the data, but what she did advise me while she was here is that they need to finish these deficiencies in order to gather the 2 months of baseline data to be able to provide that usage data for what's currently occurring in Braylorn with the existing service area. So there's that piece, she said, had to come first, and there's been a continual pressure to get those deficiencies fulfilled with our contractor, but so far that has not been finished. And so she's been unable to get that baseline data in order to know where our usage is in comparison to our permit. That was one of the key pieces that she wanted before proceeding with things. There's a potential that we could be running the collection of baseline data at the same time we take some of the other steps in order to shorten that process, but that data is not yet available.
Okay. So I guess what we could do with the motion is to move that we refer this letter back to staff to continue kind of working with the proponent on those deficiencies and to come back to the board with a recommendation on based on how much work and time and where this would fall within the priority list. Is that fair?
Yes, I think it's fair because I can't see the rest of the board making a decision without that data.
Yeah. Okay. So moved by Director Demare to refer this letter back to staff. Seconded. Director Birch-Jones. Any further discussion? Is there anyone opposed? Director Birch-Jones.
Just I had another comment. I'm wondering, we have an intern working for the north of the SLRD areas A, B, and Lillooet. And I'm just wondering, I know extremely well that agriculture and the service establishment was at the top of the list for priorities to be worked on. Has any work started? And is this an appropriate assignment for that intern? I just wanted to ask that question.
CAO Helmer.
Thank you, Chair. So we're involving the intern to the extent we can. A lot of the work involved in review service establishment is very technical in nature and requires somebody that has extensive knowledge and experience. And so we can't always give all of the projects that we might like to the intern just because she's in a learning curve. So that sometimes it takes more time to work with somebody to learn that thing than it does to just do it. So there's that balancing piece of where we draw her in and where we assign it to other staff. And I think that both the agriculture service establishment piece, there'll be some things that we could get her to do, but there's other things that that really the oversight and the bulk of the work is not something we could give to her. And then the same thing would apply when we're talking about this Talisker ask. It's involving actually several departments. and this knowledge, skills, and experience of several different employees to look at the pieces of what they're asking. So again, that's not something we could really, we can involve her in certain pieces where it's, where you could be someone learning and apply yourself to those skills. Certainly, we have an enthusiastic, intelligent, and dedicated individual. But it's just that balancing act. So hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, so we have the motion on the floor. I will call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. We're now on correspondence for information. The Union of BC Municipalities hosted a virtual session for the modernizing forest policy, and there were 3 or 4 sessions. There wasn't a lot of information given out at that time. They actually sent us a survey that includes the modernizing forestry policy. What that session, I attended it, what it was sort of an introduction to how they're doing this policy change. And then they followed it up with this survey, and it's quite a long survey, but as you go through, they outline each sort of step of how the policy will change or what they're recommending, and then seeking feedback from anyone, any of the elected officials to share their feedback on those different topics. So I'd encourage you, I did share during that meeting that the concerns of Director Demare are that often in rural areas, the local government or the local officials or local community groups and stakeholders are left out of major decisions and communications altogether, and that we strongly encourage them to engage with the local stakeholders early on major changes or decisions or closures, to ensure that we're able to share that information with the constituents in the area. So I hope that that was received. And then I do encourage Director Demare and anyone else here to go into that portal and read through it, and then share your feedback. So this isn't a board feedback. This is an open call for elected officials to read the information and share their opinions accordingly. So that's what that piece is. Any questions on that? Is there, go ahead, Director Birch-Jones.
Just, I feel that we did that round of consultation before the paper was published, the strategic paper. And, you know, I've heard a lot of the input and I've provided a lot of the input, and we just seem to be in the same old talk and log. It's really, it's a sad state of affairs from my point of view.
I agree. And that's why we've requested the meeting at UBCM with the minister. So, you know, hopefully we can have more of a conversation with the ministry and staff to share that feedback from our perspective. Any other comments? Could I have someone move receipt for information? Moved by Director Weeb, seconded by Director Crompton. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. 11.2. So this is a suite of correspondence that we've received over the last several months from various local governments. Typically, we get these letters throughout the year asking us to support various motions. We are all hopefully attending the convention next month, and we can certainly, I'll open it up for any discussion if there's any parts that anyone would like to discuss as a group now. Otherwise, we can go to convention and share our thoughts? I'll open it up. Anyone? Otherwise, we'll move receipt for information. Anyone?
I'll move
Yeah,
receipt.
go ahead. Moved receipt by Director Richmond, seconded by Director Birch Jones. Any further comments? Director Birch Jones, go ahead. No? Okay. Thank you. I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. 11.3, Fortis BC has invited us to nominate a charity within our regional boundaries worthy of receiving $15,000 towards a project. This is unfortunately only for areas that Fortis BC services. Therefore, areas A, B, and Lillooet are excluded. I'm disappointed, but I understand. Are there any charities within the regional boundaries that are serviced by Fortis BC that we should put forward? We can nominate as many as we want, but it has to be for a project. It can't be for wages. And I think that was it though. There was the criteria. Sorry, go ahead, Director Mack, and then Director Pettengill.
Where does Fortis fit into Area C?
Up to Pemberton and probably the valley, maybe.
And what do they provide?
Natural gas?
No.
No?
There's no natural gas in Pemberton or the Meadows or.
Okay,
or
it's
up
only to
this way.
Whistler then. Maybe only to Whistler? CAO Helmer?
I think so.
Oh, would it go to Wedgwoods though?
I don't believe so.
Okay. CAO Helmer, did you want to add?
Oh, I was just going to say that I think it only goes as far as Whistler. It wasn't completely clear from the mapping that they provided, but it looked like it went as far as Whistler. There may be a tiny piece of C right adjacent to Whistler. Not sure if it even made it as far as Wedgwood, but if Director Mack says it doesn't, then I'm pretty sure he must be right. So
Okay.
it'd be just the very southern part of the RD that would be eligible. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Director Pettengill, comment?
Yeah, it was really nice at FCM this year not to have it sponsored by Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers and so on. And I was thinking of that as I read this, from IPCC and some others. We've had a couple key reports saying we cannot have any new fossil fuels infrastructure. Methane, once again, is proven to be far greater than these utilities are admitting to methane leakage. And so, when Fortis is trying to promote new LNG fossil fuel plants and so on, it just seems counterproductive to be participating in this. So personally, I wouldn't be inclined to nominate a charity, but I think even if we did, I would like to have us consider also writing Fortis BC and sort of recommending in the future they put these resources into figuring out a better business model that's more aligned with our future rather than sort of these PR exercises.
Great. I love that feedback. Anyone else? So the motion then would be to receive the letter. Moved by Director Pettengill, seconded by Director Crompton. Any other comments? Director Demare?
Yeah, through this process, because I was going to nominate the Lillooet Friendship Center for a couple of different things. I did find out that they're working on the food bank and trying to do a commercial kitchen in there. So I did talk to Carol Camille, who is the administrator for Lillooet Friendship Center the other day, and I discussed looking into NDIT and seeing if they've got some funding for that project. So I gave her the contact info for Derek Baker from NDIT. We'll see where that goes.
Great.
So, yeah.
Thank you. And we'll certainly keep an eye out for other funding mechanisms that are aligned with that sort of a project, because I know that Food Banks BC has had funding. The Breakfast Club of Canada has had funding for the food bank in Whistler. And there are a number of different funding streams that we can certainly investigate to help the Friendship Center, because it's certainly a worthy cause. All right, I have it move, go ahead, Director Pettengill.
Oh, sorry. I thought we had voted on this. I have a subsequent motion attempt if.
Oh, sure. I haven't called the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Director Pettengill, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to test moving that we write to Fortis, encouraging them to put these sorts of monies towards a transition away from fossil fuels, an aggressive transition away.
Okay, I like that motion. Motion to write a letter, seconded. Director Herford, comments, Director Mack?
Yeah, I listened to this about getting away from fossil fuels and all that, but I guess I sit here and I think, okay, that's a really good idea, but what are we talking about as an alternative to heating our homes and buildings in the winter months in Canada? Well, and in parts of the United States too. I mean, the technology is not available at this point in time. And I mean, I know where I live right now, we don't have any access to natural gas, which is a lot cleaner than what we're using. We don't have any access to that. And I doubt that we ever will have. So what's the alternative? Most everybody through this area and throughout rural BC do a lot of their heating of their homes with wood. And to say, oh, we'll just use electricity, well, that is extremely expensive and way out of the reach of a lot of people's budgets. So I think we have to be really cautious when we keep bringing up this, get rid of fossil fuels completely, end it tomorrow, blah, 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 because what's the alternative? I'd like to know. Nobody's told me yet. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Burge-Jones, go ahead.
Director Mack, I'm in the middle of as we were approaching 40 degrees here and lit and burned to the ground. And I'm sitting in my beautifully cool house. It's very well insulated and everything is powered by solar. I mean, that's the obvious solution in a place like Lillooet. And it's also running the car that I'm driving around in. It's hardly perfect. I won't deny that I rely on the Toyota if I'm taking a long distance trip. But we just have to be moving this way. I am really sort of cognizant that, that the solar panels were $20,000 as an installation, but my goodness, like we've made that back already. There are some phenomenal solutions. I just wish this stuff would be subsidized by our government and promoted.
Thank you. Any other comments, Director Mack?
Yeah, I just have to comment to that. So if it's subsidized by the government, the fact of the matter is it's subsidized by taxpayers. That's each and every one of us. So you got to take that into consideration too. This is not an easy fix by any stretch. And solar panels are a wonderful thing, but like you said, they cost $20,000. Not everybody's got that money up front to do it. So I think we all have to think about, people's finances and, all this kind of stuff. I mean, we could go on about this forever, but I just think there has to be some, I'll say, common sense or whatever. Sure, we want to do this, but putting out false, timelines is not the way. It may sound good, but that's not the way to get people to buy into the program. So I'll leave it at that because, like I say, I could go on forever. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? Director Pettengill or Director Pettengill?
Yeah, I'll just say quickly, when I'm thinking about the cost, I'm not just thinking about what shows up on your bill, but the billions of dollars in losses and costs from the forest fires and all these things. And we tend to have what we're used to and the pace of change we're comfortable with. But when you look at the climate science and what's required for our survival, we have to move really fast and much faster than we're moving, no matter how hard it seems or it actually is. And so I think that's the very difficult thing we're facing. And again, when we're facing costs, we have to look at all the full costs, and we are massively subsidizing the fossil fuel industry when we pay for the fires and all the damage and so on. So, as we're having these discussions, we need to look at the whole picture. And I think that's why even little resolutions like this are important, and we need to keep pushing and pushing hard. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, we are now on 12, decision on late business. So there are 3 items on the late business. Director Clark, I've got that wrong.
Thanks, Chair. We've approved the late items as part of the approval of the agenda. This would just be additional. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, could I have let's go to Director Demare for 13.1, which is the TELUS contact information.
Thank you, Chair Ford. Yeah, I've had some fun the last 6 days, but finally I was able to get a contact from Lori Pillon, who's the assistant for Jackie Taggart, or MLA Jackie Taggart. And I got correspondence yesterday, and I've shared that contact information with the SLRD now, so that they'll have that contact. So Russell, you've got a contact now that you can talk to with TELUS for your issues out there. But yeah, so I'm going to rescind my motion because it's not needed. But all I got to tell you is that's my first go around with TELUS, and it was brutal on their online format and chat line, automated chat line. I tell you, I never won them. They were just not the best that I've seen at all. But we've got a good contact now, and I'm looking. The contact is for the North Shore, Sea to Sky, up to Lillooet, and that contact is going to give me the contact info for our representative from Kamloops. So we've got somebody we can go to.
Great.
Thank you. So the motion is rescinded.
Okay.
Is rescinded.
Do I need anything more? No. Cool. Director Demare, go ahead, Director Clark.
Sorry, Chair. If we could just have a motion to receive that report, please.
Oh, okay. Moved by Director Demare, seconded by Director Crompton. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. And I would encourage you during convention to, on their online portal, there's a exhibitors chat that you can chat with TELUS. They're always there and they're always keen to talk to people. So I would encourage you to chat with the representative at convention to share your thoughts on the process so far and moving forward. It won't be your person necessarily, but it will be someone that you can share that feedback with. Okay, moving along to 13.2. This is correspondence from the BC Ambulance Service or Emergency Health Service, as previously described in the CAO verbal update. We're grateful for that. Could I have someone move receipt of the letter? Moved by Director Mack, seconded by Director Pettengill. Any questions or comments? Director Birch-Jones, go ahead.
Thank you. Still haven't had any sort of follow-up on my concerns around the Lillooet area. So I wonder I'm still in an endless email that we will provide this information to you, but we still have the invitation standing, right, to have presentation to the board?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. This is good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Call the question. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. And 13.3 is to receive the minutes of the HR committee meeting. Moved by Director Birch-Jones, seconded by Director Demare. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And are there any notice of motions? Director Clark?
Thanks, Chair. I believe we missed 13.4.
Sorry. 13.4. Ah, yes.
Is that to do with the closed area regulation, BC?
This is to do with the discharge of firearms regulation and seeking feedback from the board. Okay. All right. Sorry, I got a little sidetracked there. Go ahead, Director Mack.
Yeah, I guess my only concern from the safety point of view, obviously, having people out and about recreational shooting is not a good thing. That's why I always support our Pemberton Wildlife Association and their range, which is professionally run and managed, and that's a good thing. But the only concern I guess I have is when you look at the map, it extends a long way up those river valleys, and is this going to impact people's ability to hunt in a like a legal hunting season? I can see it being in effect for certain times of the year, but I would just be interested in that. And it said there's some native land involved, cultural sites. So I wouldn't think that you're going to see them relinquish any of their abilities to hunt and fish and whatnot. So anyways, just a thought, I guess, to put that question forward. Thanks.
Thank you. CAO Helmer.
Thank you, Chair. I recognize it's quite a late item, and we had to put it on the board at the last minute because the deadline for any comments, if there are any, is September the 15th. But the document itself, what they say in there is that this is to prohibit, it's proposing to prohibit recreational target shooting within a certain area, and that it will not have any impact on hunting. And the province would make direct consultation with the First Nations as well as providing a referral to ourselves. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Director Pettengill, go ahead.
Yeah, the only thought that came to my mind when I read this is, in general, it seems sensible. I just wonder, we always speak about enforcement capacity and managing the rules and so on, and crowds such as they are. And so just sort of wondering out loud, are the resources in place to actually enforce this new rule or not? And maybe it's just an opportunity to sort of say, hey, here's another reason why we need more boots on the ground to help enforce these things.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's certainly feedback that we can share at the referral process. Director DeMare, go ahead.
Yeah, what they're proposing is very similar to what we have in our no shooting zone, or no firearm discharge zones in Area A. And I know the Marshall Lake community is looking at wanting an area also. So we've got 4 areas right now that have that bylaw in our Area A. And just out of curiosity, in the Squamish Valley, where all the private properties are, just wondering why they don't, if they do, if they don't have no firearms discharge zone also, similar to what we have. It's in between the reserve and the and that zone that they've got highlighted on the map. it would just make sense that they also had very similar to what we have.
Theo Hammer, do you have any feedback on that?
The only feedback I have is that the area that they've outlined, they've got a description which is on page 467 of your agenda, or the second page of this item, if you're looking at it on an item by item basis, that describes where they're proposing to put these no shooting areas, followed by at the very back page, a map that gives you a visual of where they're proposing to put it. They didn't provide any further information beyond that.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Do we want to share any comments before the September 15th deadline? Not really. So then we can move receipt of the letter. Moved by Director Crompton, seconded by Director Birch-Jones. Any further comments? Seeing none. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, 14, are there any notice of motions from anyone? Seeing none, could I have someone move that we return to closed? Moved by Director Birch-Jones, seconded by Director Crompton. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. We're going to take 5 minutes to disable the live